I always ask, was there anything before marriage that signaled this person has a propensity to have two simultaneous connections? 9 times out of 10, there's always something.
What are the main things? That he was in another relationship?
Other simultaneous relationships, or the person just never was single.
It's a fairly dismal view of people
I know.
you've just put forward.
Welcome back.
Sadia Khan, a psychologist and relationship coach.
Sadia Khan,
And we have
dating and relationships expert and coach.
the inspiring Matthew Hussey in the house, my man.
But I know plenty of very strong women who have been cheated on.
Yeah, when we get into relationships with people, it comes with conditions. Nobody's unconditional. Now, we sign an imaginary contract that I've seen the needs you have, you've seen the needs I have. We naturally expect our partners to guess our needs. Human nature is flawed.
Forgive me if I'm misreading.
No,
you,
I'm
but
sure
it
you're right.
feels like for you the headline is, it was your fault. And for me, the headline is, this was them.
And I would highly disagree with that because
I am truly shocked.
When someone is wearing a mask or living a double life, meaning they have a relationship or a marriage or kids, but then they're going out and trying to seek something else somewhere else, to live a different identity, to express themselves in a different way. What is that saying about them that they're either missing or that they need to work on to overcome?
they're unable to have difficult conversations with the people they need to have it with. Wow. So instead, they just find a way to release the energy and mask what that need is, rather than actually confront the issue where it should be. So whoever they have fallen in love with or started a life with, they started it on more kind of on the dynamic that you were describing in your 20s. They started it on that dynamic of suppressing who they truly are, suppressing their true needs, but not having the courage to walk away and not having the courage to end it. And as a result, they've had to maintain this false identity for the rest of their life, which as they get older and they get more disgruntled and they fear, like the fear of losing their family decreases. As men age, it's not like their sex drive goes up, but their willingness to cheat kind of sometimes goes up because they're like, oh, they're a bit more brave. So they end up then, engaging in behaviors that they shouldn't be doing. And it's all stems from, if they just had a more vulnerable, honest conversation with the person they love to begin with, they wouldn't find themselves searching for themselves in other people.
Could you, when you say men get older and they get more kind of brave about cheating, help me understand.
What I noticed is, like in the beginning stages, because they're still in the people stages in a fearful state, they don't risk it as much. As children come along and as they feel less and less appreciated, I'm not saying they deserve appreciation all the time, some men really are difficult, but as they mentally feel like, I've spent 10 years being loyal to her, and they almost feel like it's a credit, like 10 years I deserve, so I deserve. So they say, I've done this, and I've always been a great husband, and I've always been picking up the kids, and I've always, kind of suppressed my sexual desires whenever she doesn't want it. Now I deserve something special.
I'm not getting what I've needed for the last 10 years or what I've wanted.
Yeah. And I'm not saying they're wrong or right, but that's the mental conversation they have. And because they develop this deserved entitlement, I'm not saying maybe they do deserve it, maybe they don't. They then start
we should probably say it's wrong. Right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing, sometimes what happens, and in their defense, sometimes what happens is they have created a really good, and they have been a good husband for many years, but in the process of being a good husband, it's been done by suppressing their needs. So they sometimes
they haven't been courageous in expressing them either.
That's the main problem. It's not that the wife is this evil wife that deprives them of sex or deprives them of intimacy. Some men have gone months, years without getting that fundamental need met, but they never voiced it enough. They might say it in a jokey way or in a drunken night out that I don't get enough sex, but they don't say it in a constructive way.
Why do you think men are more willing to cheat than have a courageous conversation and say to their wife or their partner, here's what I really want sexually?
Because what they truly desire sexually is going to be met with some resistance with the partner they selected. And they understand that.
Or they think it will.
They think it will.
Yeah.
And they think that it's almost uncomfortable. Whatever they're desiring, they almost, when you have a wife and you've seen her breastfeed your children and you've gone through that kind of experience with her, it almost feels unfair to tell her your fantasy about what you want done and stuff. Yeah. So they have these two kind of compartments when it comes to sex, and then that one almost feels unaligned to the woman they married.
Interesting.
But why are we talking about this just in the vein of men and not women, saying that I've put in all of this work, I've raised these kids, I've been here 20 years, I quite feel entitled to a younger heart a man now? Why are we talking about this just in the context of men?
In just my experience of it, what happens in my experience of women that love their husband and have this connected lifestyle, their desire for sex decreases as they feel more connected. As they have the kids, as they're stable, they feel like, oh, we had the adventurous sex in the first 10 years. Like, I don't need to do this at 45 years old. Like, I've done my time.
On their stats, though, I don't know the stats on this, but aren't the stats actually more damning sometimes for women than men in how many women cheat in long-term relationships?
I would imagine they are so, but I would still say it might be because they had a people-pleaser kind of husband, that they couldn't get that masculinity out of her, they couldn't get those courageous conversations out of her, they couldn't get that confrontational nature out of him, and they found it in a man that would just say, I want this from you, I want that from you, and that make them feel a bit more alive than the guy that's kind of suppressing himself. But again, this is just, like I said, I have a skewed version of male version of events. So what in my experience, if they think they've done 10 years of loyalty, they deserve 10 years of like enjoying their life.
Or even 1 year, or like something, right? They're like, okay, I can just have a few escorts every now and then.
Yeah, particularly if they've been deprived of sex. They can almost compromise with any other deprivation, but when they feel deprived of sex, they feel like they've earned the right to free sex as they get older.
Wow. But but what can men do in that position? Let's say there's a man who's been in a 5 to 15 year marriage. They've got a family, they have kids, and they've tried to do their best as a husband and a leader and a father. But they are just craving some type of sexual adventure. And they, deep down, don't think that their wife can give them that. Or maybe they can't get out of their head what they've seen the last 15 years of their wife breastfeeding and being a motherly figure and not a sexual figure. Whatever it is.
Yeah, the switch has turned off.
Yeah, maybe the switch is turned off because they're now like motherly as opposed to sexual being, whatever it might be. What can a man do to communicate what they want sexually without hurting the woman they're with?
A man who has achieved endless heights in his career. Are you somebody who's absolutely made it in his professional life, but his personal life just doesn't seem to match up? Are you somebody who goes through intense highs in business, but intense lows in your personal relationships? You might be somebody who has been blocking out relationships or entering relationships where you don't feel appreciated, or it's lacking the sexual or emotional intimacy that you require. If this sounds like you, then I have a program specifically catered to your needs. I've been helping high-end clients for a really long time, and I am able to identify the exact problems, the exact causes, and the exact solutions. So if this sounds like you, then please feel free to register below your details, and I will send you all the, and I'll be able to, I'll be able to send over my program and hopefully fix, and I'll be able to send over my program and hopefully help, and I'll be able to send over my program and hopefully I'll be able to send over my program and help you attain the love and personal life that you've been craving.
Like motherly as opposed to sexual being, whatever it might be. What can a man do to communicate what they want sexually without hurting the woman they're with?
I think the first thing is to watch your habits. If you are constantly stimulating yourself with too much pornography and too much social media and stuff, that's not going to help your situation by looking at novel situations again and again. So watch what you consume. The second conversation is you've just got to remember what means more to you. Does the thrill of sex mean more to you than the safety of a marriage and kids? Now, if you recognize that marriage means more, but it doesn't mean I don't want the thrill, I still want that, I still deserve that, then what it moves on to is having conversations with your wife to understand how you can ignite that sex appeal in her. Perhaps there's something you're doing that's making her not feel like you are not tapping into that femininity in her. It's sometimes a dynamic. So ask her, is there something that I used to do or I can do that would make you feel more connected to me? And they say, oh, in the beginning she was so wild, but maybe in the beginning you were taking her out more, or maybe in the beginning you were texting her a lot more, or maybe in the beginning you weren't turning to pornography on nights when you were. So maybe there was behaviors in you in the beginning that ignited a part of her that made her more. Yeah. So have those conversations. And sometimes some women are just plain difficult, and I understand those circumstances. But until you've tried what you did in the beginning, you can't completely complain that that's gone. Yeah. So.
And before I jump to you, Matthew, do you think from the men that you're working with, that you hear conversations with, are you hearing that more men cheat or more women cheat?
From my experiences, more women. Yeah, from my experiences, and there are a couple of reasons for that is women are naturally, in my experience, and being a woman myself, is we're a bit more aware of a man's propensity to cheat. So we're not particularly naive when it comes to when he's gone for too long and he hasn't answered too many calls and he hasn't been available. We're a bit more attuned to these signs, and we kind
What's
of
happening? And when you ask him, hey, where were you? And you weren't saying what was happening. You were vague.
We've had friends that have been cheated on that tell us all about it, and they tell us all the signs. Our moms might tell us all the signs and stuff. Whereas for men, that conversation is so sacred. They don't really have that with each other. So they're also missing. So they go in with a little bit of naivety that women just don't cheat whatsoever. They just think my wife would never. That's their common thing, that she would never. And the other thing is they're not attuned to the signs. They're not attuned to the signals. So when she is depriving him of affection or depriving him of attention, or when she starts taking care of herself and going out a little bit more or making more of an effort to go to work, they just see that as normal feminine behavior. They just see that as, girls getting dressed up there. They don't necessarily see the signs that it's a change in dynamic. They don't pick up the signals as much. They become a little bit curious, but they don't become accusatory the same way that,
Really?
yeah.
But were you saying, why do women cheat more? Or
I'm saying who cheats more based on your experience of conversations you're having and what you're noticing.
What are you thinking about why women cheat more?
That's
true.
In my personal experience with the women that do cheat, it's not that all women cheat, but the women that do cheat, it's very little to do with the woman herself. It's more to do with the man she selects.
Really?
In my experience, I can look at a couple and tell by the man if she's going to cheat. Where the men and her have a very strong dynamic, where it's very clear that they know each other inside out and where they can be themselves completely. And more so than anything, I can tell she feels safe in his company. It's unlikely she cheats. But where I feel like she's kind of the boss, or she feels like she doesn't respect his opinion, and it's not necessarily she's just like he's kind of allowed himself to take that backseat, where she can disrespect him openly, where she feels like she can tell him anything and he just instantly believes it and follows her commands, it sets him in a position where she doesn't have a fear of losing him. And as a result of no fear of losing him, there's an openness to try alternatives, because she knows if worst case scenario he finds out, he's still going to stay. And it's
a fairly dismal view of people.
I know.
You've just put forward.
Well,
because what we're saying is that
unless they don't have values within themselves.
Right. The thing that's missing from this conversation is values on the men's and the women's side. Is that it's kind of, the idea there with women is that they're.
Guys, welcome to my course on masculinity. And in this course, not only will I be able to completely transform your understanding of women, but on a more personal level, you will enhance your self-esteem, self-respect, and your boundaries. The goal of this course is to take a man that has absolutely fantastic intentions, wants to find love, wants to commit, wants to have a good, healthy relationship, but is finding that he's constantly running into women who are narcissistic, who are disrespectful, who are disloyal. Now, if you are finding that continuously, then there must be something in your engagement with women that is causing this. What my course will do is look at where this problem comes from, how to resolve it, how to communicate effectively with men and women, and how to command respect. Most importantly, how to improve your self-respect. And throughout the course, you'll be given interactive sessions, but with course materials to help you channel and journal your learning. So if you are interested in becoming the most masculine version of yourself, join today.
Men cheat in relationships, which is that they essentially feel like they've put in their service, like they're in the army and they've done their time. And at that point they feel like, God, you know what? I really feel entitled to an escort or to this stage. By that rationale, you couldn't have seen it with that guy, because back when he was putting in his service, he was a totally committed man.
I would say that even with men, I would say there's a couple of things. I would say that it's not that I can, even with my own husband, it's not that I know for sure he's going to cheat or not cheat. But when somebody has a propensity, and how you know they have a propensity is, chances are most cheaters have cheated in the past and they've told you something. They won't tell you directly, but they might give you hints where they might say, oh, and we weren't working out, and so towards the end I met somebody, and they'll use that common phrase towards the end. Or they might say, or you might just notice that they are a hypersexual. They need that as a form of connection all the time. So if you deprive them of that, they might. The key thing is you've got to know what people are like in terms of what they do when they're at their worst. If you've noticed at their worst, they can be emotionally abusive. At their worst, they can be cheaters. They kind of show you that in the courting stage before marriage.
Sure, but someone can be hypersexual and just be great sex in a relationship. How are you to know that hypersexual means they're going to have an inability to be monogamous versus they've just got a very high sex drive that's going to make for a great sex life in a relationship?
If I deprive them of that hypersexuality is not going to go anywhere. So I know that if I am dealing with somebody hypersexual, no problem. But I have to understand with their hypersexuality means if and when I deprive them of that, I open a door. Similarly, I'm a hyper emotional, I'm hyper clingy, all those things. Luckily, my partner's very kind of responsive. If he deprives me of that thing that is very clear to him from day one, chances are, God forbid, who knows, something might happen. It's when you deprive people what they should.
You're letting people off the hook so easily.
Really?
Yeah, because if your husband wasn't giving you attention or time or whatever, I would assume that there would be 200 conversations that would happen prior to you deciding, I'm going to go off and get with a bloke on the side.
Yeah.
The same is true the other way around.
You may not cheat. You might just end it.
I'm personally not a cheat. Yeah, so I understand.
If we're taking the guy you're talking about that's hypersexual and the woman who hasn't had sex with him for a period of time, there's nothing that excuses the inability to have the 100 conversations that need to happen.
That's what most people don't
I would love if that was true.
That's what you're saying.
I would love that to be true.
What I take issue with is not calling out. It's almost like a calling out of the person who's not had sex with the person, as opposed to calling out the person who's not having the conversation.
I understand what you mean, but here's the thing: when we get into relationships with people, it comes with conditions. Nobody's unconditional. Now we sign an imaginary contract that I've seen the needs you have, you've seen the needs I have. We naturally expect our partners to guess our needs. If people are we're in a very, all praise be to God, privileged position where we understand the importance of communication. The average person who's never done any self-help or who's never done anything will interpret, my wife doesn't have sex with me, she doesn't love me. They're not thinking I need to vocalize this. Similarly, a woman saying my man's never complimented me. Do I tell him I want more compliments, or do I go with the guy at work who naturally compliments me? Human nature is flawed. So instead, I get it's totally wrong. It's not a justification. It's more just understanding that ideally we should have these conversations. Ideally we should be emotionally articulate. Realistically, it doesn't happen. So the best thing we can do is select people who are values naturally align with us, and people show us our values quite early on.
But based on what you've just said, I would say the best thing we can do is partner with a good communicator.
Yeah.
Not partner with someone that we just hope to God we always meet their values, because they can't communicate, and if we ever don't meet them, they're going to be running.
I would agree.
I think that's why so many people break up, is because they get into a relationship without communicating their true values and who they truly are. And they get together based on attraction or based on common likes and interests. And
my greatest fear early on in meeting someone would always be if we can't have conversations.
Really?
Because if you take a version of what you're talking about that I think shows up in early dating, it's ghosting. Right? What is ghosting? I've decided I don't want you anymore, or I'm not getting my needs met in some way, or whatever. And I do the ultimate in not communicating. I just disappear. And when that happens, it's what we have is someone in front of us who cannot communicate. So the answer to that, to me, isn't how do I figure out how to make sure I do everything right next time so that I don't get ghosted? The answer is, how do I make sure that I pre-select for the kind of person that when things get difficult or when they don't get their needs met, has a conversation with me instead of just disappears off the face of the earth?
Yeah. But have you not seen in your practice sometimes some people have never done, never cheated or anything like that, but something in this relationship or something has triggered them and they become a person they don't recognize? But I do agree, it's down to poor communication, because every need can be communicated. But do you think it is just a character flaw, or do you think it's a flaw in the dynamic of the relationship? Or have
if someone cheats?
Or have you been in relationships where that person I could have cheated on, this person I can never think of doing? Do you think it's a dynamic? For me personally, I would say it's more of a character thing, because I've got religious beliefs and blah, blah. But I do think most people, it's a dynamic thing rather than a character thing.
I mean, I don't think the rest of the world needs religious beliefs to have that character thing. I think that's the golden rule is enough.
Yeah, but do you think everybody has that, or do you think it's a dynamic